Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandy, and today we are going to be talking, having a conversation on systemic racism in the criminal justice system. I have two really amazing people here with me today. My co-host is, and also we have attorney Amber Webb Booker. Amber, we want to thank you for joining us today. I know people are really excited to learn more about you. This is my first time meeting Amber as well. And so I know I've definitely been looking forward to today.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we get to educate people who are watching and kind of just give them, perspective as well. Um, so, for those of you who don't know, Ace and I actually met while protesting, and since then we've just kind of joined forces. And it's always nice to meet somebody who has the same passion that you do. Who's willing to put in work as well. Not just talk to talk. Um, and I think Ace has a really amazing story that a lot of people need to hear as well. So I just want to give you guys a minute to just introduce yourselves. Ace, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first.
All right. My name is King Gates, and I'm representing the Black World Family Movement. What this movement is a human rights, a pro-social revolutionary movement in which we base our ideology and philosophy on the concrete analysis of the concrete conditions in the community, and we try to create practical programs to handle. So we educate political education, we create different programs to address the concrete needs within specifically the Black community. I did a total of 7 years in prison. So I know about the criminal justice system, and I was studying the law the whole time I was incarcerated, and now I'm a criminal justice major. Well, my ultimate goal is to become a lawyer as well.
I'm Amber. I'm born and raised in Dallas. I have been here my entire life. I left to go to college. I went to George Washington University in DC. I got my undergrad degree there, and then I came back to Texas. I got my law degree at Texas Tech University. Um, I have overwhelmingly worked in civil practice, but I did spend about 2 years as a prosecutor. I worked for Craig Watkins in the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. I currently work as Assistant Vice President and Senior Legal Counsel in litigation for an international communications conglomerate, but I still take pro bono cases. I still do a lot of work trying to basically deconstruct this thing called white supremacy. I co-host a podcast with another lady who works in corporate America called Brokish, where we talk about financial oppression specifically. That is unique to sort of white supremacy and the inequitable systems that have been constructed here in America. So this is sort of the passion work that I do to empower and ultimately liberate our people. So thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, of course, we're excited to get into some things with you as well. So my first question for you is, what your why, and why did you decide to become an attorney and get involved in the way that you are?
I always knew, I think that my gifts and my interests sort of pointed me in the direction of law. I was always that kid, you know, reading, and I was always very interested in history and politics, but I was also always talking. you know, I I always was the kid with the longest Easter piece. I was in debate. I was in youth and government. I was in mock trial from a very early age. And so that was just my natural interest. And then I got in high school and I sort of thought I was going to take a detour. I really became interested in the Middle East and Middle Eastern history and just sort of systems of governance. What does it mean to live in a democracy? How do we balance democracies with non-Eurocentric ideas, like layering democracy in places where there's fundamentally or primarily Islamic populations that have different viewpoints and worldviews. And so in college, I double minored in Arabic and Middle Eastern studies, and I considered for a moment moving to the Middle East and writing and teaching. But I graduated from college in 2007, sort of right at the origins of Arab Spring, and it was just a very uncertain, unstable time. And so I decided to go to law school, and I just got bit by the bug. I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
I knew um, I figured out what my why was. I think I always knew, but I couldn't really articulate it. The thing God created me to do is to take information that people feel like they cannot understand or they cannot grasp and talk to them about it in ways that is relatable and practical and engaging. And so sort of everything I talk about, whether it be the Bible or politics or religion or oppression, that's really my why. And so trial work has really helped me to cultivate that, because you get 12 people or 6 people in a jury box and everybody's coming from a different place. But for most people, the 7-syllable words in the expert report or the technical terms, people don't talk like that, right? And so, I used to catch a lot of flack when I would quote rap lyrics or the Bible or my grandmother in trial, but I talk like the people I knew, and the people I knew were the people staring back at me. And I knew that when they were sitting around their tables at night, they didn't have automobile collisions or catastrophic loss. People had fires, people slipped and fell, people had car wrecks, they hurt their back, they didn't hurt their lumbar spine. And so
Right.
really my why was empowering people with information, because we have done a very good job in America of making information and education elite and convincing people that they need a middleman to understand things that are really not complicated. And so my joy is handing people information and saying, this is what it is. A, go fact check me now that it's in a way that you can understand it. And B, go be empowered and do something with it. Because we have whole systems and whole groups of people who are profiting off just the ignorance of people. And so my why is really to try to disrupt that.
I love that because I think that that's super important, especially for young men who get incarcerated. And, they may not even know what they're signing up for. They may not even know what they might get a plea deal and not even know the terms of that deal. And so I think that's definitely super important. And it's amazing that you're willing to, put in the work to do that.
Right.
I wanted to also know your take on stereotypes and how they can affect young Black men specifically, but just young minorities in general. Um, how they can, lead to prejudice and discrimination.
So when I talk to people all the time, I tell them that you have to be aware of stereotypes, but I think the way we really reclaim our power, at least for me, what I have decided is I am who I am everywhere I am. And so part of how I harness the power or release the glory God has placed in me is by being who I am, right? So I have friends all the time who are like, you don't really act like that in court. And I'm like, well, come down. I have a trial on this day. And so they're always very surprised. They're like, you talk in court just like you talk to us. I was like, well, fool, I told you that. That's why you here. Because you didn't believe me, right? And so I think the way we address stereotypes is by encouraging our youth and our people to see the beauty in who they are. So, you're not ghetto. You know how to code switch. You know how to speak more than one language. Because it's only ghetto if you decide to measure it by other people's standards, right? It's only a problem, right, if you decide to evaluate who you are and how you show up in the world by somebody else's metrics. And so I tell kids all the time, there's nothing wrong with how you speak. There's nothing wrong, but there's only something wrong if when you're communicating, the other person doesn't understand what you're saying. That's the only problem in communication. Is if you're communicating and the person you're talking to or the audience you're talking to doesn't understand. What you have to be aware of is that you are powerful because you know how to speak to a lot of different people. And so the way we bust the stereotype is by empowering our people to see that there's nothing wrong with who they are. There's nothing wrong even if they fit the stereotype. But the power is to press into it and see it as valuable and to own the vehicle you exist in. I never wear a suit to court. I never. In 10 years of practicing law and almost 100 jury trials, I don't wear suits. I might wear a very nice dress with a blazer, but that is not who I am. I don't wear no suits. I am a Black woman. I have hips. I have a butt. Spanx are uncomfortable. I have to wear them, but I can't work like that. That is not who I am. I wear my dollar store earrings. That is who I am. I go to court with these kind of nails. That's who I am, right? And so I tell people all the time that it's not about trying to resist the urge to play into the stereotype. It's recognizing that the stereotype is created because you're being judged based on a standard somebody else created. So we just have to, what I tell kids all the time is that you're not using bad grammar right now. You just got to know that there's also another way to talk besides the way you talk. And there are going to be some people who don't understand the way you talk at home, right? There are going to be some people who don't, you can't hit them with the cap, no cap, because they don't understand that. So the problem is not that you're being ghetto. The problem is that you're communicating in a way that your audience doesn't understand, right? So that's the only problem. So here's another way to do it. So when you talk to somebody who doesn't speak how you speak at home, you can communicate with them. So we just
Right.
have to reimagine the language we use and the labels we let people put on us.
Yeah, and
Right.
I like that too because, like you said, you're not trying to conform to be, like every other lawyer you see in the courtroom, and that, that makes you different. But it also, I'm sure, is super inspiring to people who watch you and young people,
That's real.
and I know not everybody, does this to be a role model, but you're going to be seen as that regardless.
Correct.
And so, how do you feel, Ace, about just stereotypes? And do you feel like they played a part in your incarceration?
Yes, because when they over police certain communities, like I'm from Buffalo, New York, in our communities is community of color is poor. So we also we get over police and it's like, or you might be driving as a Black man and you get stopped because the stereotype is that the color of our skin is criminal, so it is negatives to, stereotypes, but I feel like we gotta understand and know the law and educate these kids on the harsh reality of what's going on. Ain't no way around it. Your skin color is gonna be looked at as criminal, and that's just part of the system of systemic racism that we're dealing with in this society.
Right, and that goes back to something that I always talk about as well is the the meaning behind creating a criminal. How blacks are, stopped. I think 75% of all routine traffic stops are black people, and which is crazy because you think about things that have just happened over the past few years. You think about Philando Castile, who had been stopped almost 50 times in a span
Wow.
of years before he was murdered. And you see a cop, gets off on the charges. He wasn't charged, or he was charged but was not convicted.
Correct.
So, these things come into play because it's like, okay, if you got stopped 50 times, what would your perspective be on police? How would you feel? How would your relationship with police be? You know, if you got stopped 50 times in 13 years, you're not gonna be like, oh, I like that guy. I like these guys. It's gonna create, a rift in a relationship that, is meant, police are meant to protect us. Um, and, obviously we've seen over the years just a complete disregard for Black lives specifically. Um, and then going forward on that, um, obviously your first interaction with the courts and with being in legal trouble is the police, because they're the first point of that's who stopped me. Now I got to go to court. Um, how do you guys feel about going to court and being given if you're rich, you can afford a lawyer, you can afford proper representation. But if you're poor, you're kind of put into this little pool where it's like, okay, now you have to get a court appointed lawyer. And how do you guys feel about that whole process?
So if I can just say, I think you guys raised a great point, but we have to even back up just a little bit further, because before we even get to court, what's really important to talk about is how white supremacy conspires to determine what we define as criminal, right? Because one thing we have to remember is that the law is racist, right? So constitutionalism was born out of the same system that was foundationed on chattel slavery. So it was created to work in tandem with white supremacy, not be antagonistic to it.
Yeah.
So when you filter criminality through that lens, you see that how we determine who and what to criminalize is rooted in discrimination. For example, if Black people weren't out here wearing no mask in COVID, I bet you $5 it wouldn't be a civil fine. It would be a criminal fine, right? It would be criminal, like you could get arrested. Even when we look at things like the most prevalent type of theft in the United States is wage theft. Wage theft accounts for $15 billion in taking from employees by employers every year. And wage theft is overwhelmingly committed by corporations and white people, but it is a civil penalty. The attorney generals in the respective states prosecute wage theft civilly, and they fine corporations. So Target can steal your wages and get a fine, but if you steal Target's TV, you got to go to court, right? So just think about that. So all of that is in the sauce. So by the time you get to court, you have to know that there's been a whole buildup to make it more likely for you to get there than not get there, right? Because ain't nobody stealing $15 billion worth of nothing from no retailer every year, right? So by the time you get to court, in that system that chooses to criminalize you in that way, you're already disadvantaged just because what you've done has been labeled criminal, right? And the system has chosen not to label some other things criminal. So not only is it a economic benefit to be wealthy, but there's also racial disadvantage. Like, for example, if you are wealthy and you can hire an attorney, before you are arraigned, before charges are levied against you. We saw it all the time where people would be arrested. They hadn't even been charged yet, but they could afford to hire an attorney. So think about the difference it makes when you're able to hire an attorney early in the system. So the attorney is not even dealing with the court. The attorney is dealing with the police to shape what kind of charges are going to be brought against you, right?
Right.
So think about how different that is, because if you're indigent, by the time you get an attorney, you've already been charged, you've already been through intake, you've already done all of that. But think about the difference then just when you go get questioned. You're able to have an attorney present, and your attorney is able to start advocating for you before anything is ever charged, and to shape what the police allege you did in the probable cause affidavit. That is incredibly powerful. And when you have access to resources, when you have an advocate working with you to shape what the law even accuses you of doing, that's very powerful because A, they don't have unrestricted access to you. They can't talk to you without your attorney present. So that in and of itself is going to limit the availability of evidence because you are going to be protected. And B, that attorney can shape the way the case goes by presenting your side on your behalf without you having to answer questions about it. It's the best of both worlds. And so it really does make a difference when you have access to an attorney earlier in the process. It makes a difference when you understand what your rights are. And it makes a difference when the police view you as somebody who is not vulnerable to being taken advantage of because they feel like they can treat you any old kind of way because you don't know your rights.
Right.
Right. And I think a lot of times we also see, when somebody does know their rights, you see an immediate backlash from the police. Like they get angry if you know your rights.
Yeah, they be tight.
Yeah, they
Mm-hmm.
do. They get angry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not being able to touch you, that's offensive to them. And so as far as sentencing also and conviction rates, how do you feel that systemic racism plays a part in the sentencing of Black men, specifically even for crimes towards white people? I know that Black, when a Black person kills a white person, they're 40 times, more likely to, or 40 times more likely to receive a death sentence.
Correct. Correct. So one of the things that we have to talk about is that in this fake world where, you know, American constitutionalism says we don't think about race and justice is blind, sentencing is designed to do two things. It's designed to curb recidivism, which is reoffending, right? And it's designed to keep the community safe by offering the person a just sentence that bears a relationship to the crime they are accused of committing. However, when you add in one of the things Ace was talking about, over policing, um, in Black communities and communities of color where over policing is often present, you have people who have oftentimes had multiple encounters with the police for things that might be minor or might not be minor, but usually those encounters are born out of racial animus. So, on paper, what the appearance is because they've had all of these encounters that they are more likely to be a recidivist, right? They are more likely to commit another crime. Because one of the ways that we try to determine in criminal justice who is likely to reoffend and who is not is by looking at their past record, right? So a clean record would tend to indicate that this is an isolated incident and we don't need to sentence you as harshly as somebody else because this is a one-off. So we can give you a sentence that will help you to learn your lesson and keep the community safe, but we don't have to throw the book at you. But when you add in things like over policing, criminalization in schools, right? The criminalization of mental health problems, the criminalization of poverty and homelessness. When I was a prosecutor, I can't tell you when I would get my jail chain in the morning, how many criminal trespass charges I would have on my jail chain, which would basically be homeless people who would be in places trying to seek shelter, right? They would just be on the train or in restaurant, in restaurant buildings because of the weather or because they didn't have anywhere else to go. But you got 20, 30, 40 criminal trespass offenses on your record. Like somebody said, I'm like, I just saw you on the jail chain Monday. It's Wednesday. And we're criminalizing literal poverty because they're doing it because they don't have nowhere to go, right? Or we criminalize mental health problems. So then when you get a person like that and you look at their record and you see 20 or 30 offenses, what it suggests is that, oh, this person is a habitual offender. So we need to throw the book at them because they are a recidivist. They continue to commit the crime over and over and over again. And so what systemic racism does is it tells you to look at that rap sheet and see all of those offenses and throw them at that person, right? There are some places where judges don't even have any discretion because of the way that the state laws are written to consider the type of the offense or the reason why the offense is what it is, because the language in the law is such that if you have this number of offenses, you get this sentence. If you have
Yeah.
this number of offenses, you get this sentence. So when you have over policing, when you have criminalization in schools, kids fighting in schools and they're getting arrested instead of getting handled like minors, by the time something does happen, even if something does happen, even if it is a valid arrest and a valid conviction, because all of these things have happened in a racist system, you have an inaccurate picture of who that person is because of the environment they have been in and the ways that they have been um, profiled and unfairly encountered the police and law enforcement. And so oftentimes that's why we see Black boys and Black men in particular having harsher sentences. Because the more encounters you have with the police, the more likely it is they're going to be able to find something. That's just statistics, whether it be a
Hmm.
busted tail light, whether it be, I mean, anything. Anytime somebody is encountering you, they're eventually going to find something. And then those things are then weaponized to say, well, this person is a criminal
It's a
and they
pattern.
are a habitual criminal because they have this many encounters with the police. So this is a justification for us to throw the book at people who are very likely good candidates for rehabilitation and reentry into society.
Right.
Right,
Now,
right.
we was talking about last night with that's what I was talking about with that crime bill. That whole era of three strikes, like you might I had two nonviolent felonies and you catch a third one, and you know that's the same thing when she was speaking about the disparity with systemic racism. A person can get caught with crack and get caught with cocaine, and you get sentenced to 100 times greater for crack than you will for cocaine. You understand this is a white man's drug and this is a poor person's drug, so it's like it's embedded in the fabric of American society.
Yeah. And one of the things that the crime bill did, because, people love to talk about, well, the crime bill, that was federal law. So, only 4% of offenses are federal law. What the crime bill did that was particularly problematic to Black people is it funded police departments without any accountability or without any requirement, particularly in departments like New York police, like departments in the South, in places like Mississippi and Alabama and Arizona and Texas, where there were histories of discriminatory and oppressive policing. The crime bill funneled millions and billions of dollars into state police forces across the United States for them to continue doing what they were doing without any oversight or accountability. So if you have more police racially policing, if you have an increase in militarized policing, you are not only going to have an increase in federal convictions, that trickle down to the state level too. And that is why the crime bill was so problematic, is because it funded the states and it allowed them to put money in the hands of police departments without any requirement that they address issues that everybody knew about, that have been going on for a long period of time. And more money just made those issues worse because they were able to hire more people and do it in more communities.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and then just going back to what you said about, you know, criminalizing not only, homelessness, poverty, but mental health as well. I know that a lot of times it can be frustrating because when, when a white person commits a crime, a lot of times we hear the mental health, excuse. And
mhm.
allowed to have that excuse. Black people they're not allowed to have, mental health issues, or, it doesn't play a part in their sentencing. It's not like, oh, well, we're going to give you a lighter sentence because we think that there's, something that could be possibly wrong with you, or things like that in a specific specific case that stands out to me is definitely two different rape cases with Brock Turner, who was a white, he was a white man who got basically let off of a rape. He, was on
Mm-hmm.
video raping an unconscious woman, somebody who was passed out. Um,
Yeah.
and the judge told him that he feared for his life in prison, and so he wouldn't get any, he wasn't going to get prison time. And then you have the case of Brian Banks, who was a football player who served I think about 6 years in prison
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
for a rape that he was falsely accused of. And so just the differences, in sentencing and, the fact that it's still happening. Like these are modern day trials. These are, things that just happened, a few years ago. What do you think? How do you think we can, reform that? How do you think that we can go about fixing that situation?
So, what you're talking about is a perfect example of how systems of oppression work in tandem. Because one of the reasons why it is particularly easy to criminalize mental health issues with Black and Brown people is because of medical biases that exist in how those services are provided, right? And so when we go back and we look at the origins of how psychiatry and psychology came to be, um, those things are sort of bedrocked on these misplaced notions of Black people, being inherently less mentally um, sound than white people, but also there is this sort of bruteness that is inherently ascribed to us. And there is this violence and this aggressiveness. And so a lot of times you have Black people with legitimate mental health problems who have never been identified and diagnosed properly, so that by the time they get to court, even with good, competent attorneys, their ability to launch those kind of defenses is so hamstrung just because there is a deficiency in the record to demonstrate that that actually is an issue, right? And so it's very hard for a jury to accept the word of a paid doctor who's now coming in when the person is trying to get a particular type of sentence or plead a particular type of mindset. The jury is like, well, if that was going on, why wasn't there any other treatment? Well, those things don't happen in a vacuum. You know, the access to mental health care in Black communities, in impoverished communities, is woefully inadequate, is woefully lacking. The ability for us to get diagnosed, to get medicated, to have those things is very much a reflection of the bias and the discrimination that exists in how medical care is provided here in the United States. And it's an example of how, when you layer that on top of a biased criminal justice system, that can be a problem for a lot of people who legitimately have who have mental health problems, and that evidence is rightly before the court, but because they've never had the opportunity to be evaluated, there is no evidence, right? And so one of the things that we have to do is recognize that it is not just a criminal justice system that we have to deconstruct. We have to deconstruct and dismantle the inequity and the inequality that exists in the delivery of medical services, in housing, in the financial services sector, because if you only do it in criminal justice and we leave it intact in all of those other areas, nothing will change. Nothing will change.
Yeah. 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 So I definitely feel like that's a super valid point. And I think that, it's I know it's tough for a lot of people to kind of grasp that, um, because, if it's not happening in their circle, it's like, well, it's just not happening, or, well, then they should have just got help. that's always an excuse. If they had problems, why didn't they just go get help? And it's like, it's not that simple. And like you said, a lot of times we're looking at this like, when it's a white person, it's a mental health issue. But then when it's a black person, they're a bad person with ill intent, and you know they're they're dangerous, or we get that all the time.
And one of the things we have to remember is that white supremacy is a marketing machine. And it's not just marketing to the oppressors, it markets to the oppressed too. So part of the ways that white supremacy is effective is that marginalized people ingest messages that reverberate out of that system too. So for white people, when they see sort of affects that are off, or they are, struggling with things, they are taught and equipped with the language that Sally is depressed. There is something not right. What we are told is that we are crazy. When we are laying in bed all day, we're lazy, right? Or ain't nothing wrong with him. He just special. We have been shut out of that evolving language in how to identify and normalize mental health struggles. And that is very much intentional, because if we internally can identify it, I heard somebody talking the other day, like he had a brother that was like sleeping in a car for months and was just like walking up and down the street. And it took them months to realize something's not right. And it turned out that he was manic depressive bipolar, but we are not equipped in the same way to normalize those type of struggles, to identify them, to encourage our family members to get help, to speak
Right.
about it in the same way that majority and white communities are, because we have been conditioned to accept the labels that they place on us. And so that is something that we have to be more mindful of, is that messaging also makes it difficult for us to oftentimes identify it and seek out the help. And then sometimes when we do, we have to face a system that creates a lot of barriers for us to ultimately get the help that we need, right?
Yeah, definitely agree with that too.
Me too.
Yeah, because I know that if, in a lot of ways it can be seen as being weak, in our communities. Asking for help, period, can be seen as weak, and and then you have, when you do ask for help and you say, I'm sick, or I need this, oh, well, we're going to look at you sideways. We're not going to give you this narcotic medication. We're not going to give
Mm-hmm.
you this medication because you're kind tend to abuse these kinds, or, stuff like that. And I think that definitely that's super important, plays a huge role, um, in sentencing and convictions as well. So, Ace, I wanted to go to you and just ask you, obviously there's effects of having a criminal record. So once you come out and once you've, been incarcerated, um, how did that affect you as far as, employment, housing?
Well, my dad, in Buffalo, New York, my dad, he owned a lot of properties. And when I came home, he had helped me. 'Cause he got his own home improvement company, and I was working with him, and he had helped me purchase my own house. So I really wasn't able to, feel the effects of house. But it is a lot of my friends that was incarcerated that come home is, you can't get certain house and you get denied because of a criminal record. It's getting better, like with the job. I don't think they can ask you certain things in New York. I don't know how it is in Texas because I just only been here for about a year. But even with far as me trying to become a lawyer, you can't even be a lawyer in Texas with a felony. So I got to try to get a pardon and all different types of things because you can't do that in New York. You can, but not in Texas. So I can't really speak too much, on that because I own a couple properties in New York thanks to my dad. But it plays a big role in you. They say once you're supposed to be reformed and rehabilitated, but it's still all these holes of you not being able to, you do your time and you come home and you can't be considered. a regular person because you got all these obstacles you got to overcome. And we don't know that when we're young because I caught my case at 17, so we running around and we become products of our environment. We do dumb things and then we got to do our time and we don't realize the catastrophic effects that these felonies have on us later in life, so I try to be an inspiration for the youth to learn from my experience and not have to go through the same thing because it's crazy, man.
Right? Do you feel like after being incarcerated, you're targeted by police more frequently?
Um, See, like in New York, New York is like ran by Democrats, and they whole system is about making money. That criminal justice system, so they get a lot of money off of locking people back up. So the recidivism rate is very high. You can get locked up for a curfew violation. People that's on parole and probation, they always in and out. And you might see in New York, you might do 5 years. You might get sentenced to 5 years, but you gotta automatically, even I maxed out on mine, but you gotta automatically still come home on post release, which is basically parole. But it's like, say you get 5 years sentence, you're gonna get a 5 years post release, regardless if you max out or not. You can't do all your time, and you still gotta come home on this post release. And then they got real strict rules. Like I might have been locked up for a non-violent charge. Somebody else could have been locked up for a violent charge, but we still got the same rules. Like that don't even make sense. You got curfews, and if you violate the curfew, the minimum is 12 months sentence. And then out here, I see they parole is totally different. They're not really, they let you, live your life. You hang yourself. As long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're gonna be good. If you out there, they just looking for a reason to get you back in there because that's their money maker.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's also a super good and valid point with the prison systems in the United States. And this is like all over the United States, so it's pretty relevant everywhere. I think prisons make they're like a what $12 billion industry.
No,
I think it's a little more than that.
100,
Yeah.
100 and something
It
billion.
could honestly be
It's
like yeah,
100 and something billion. 'Cause you got many different. You got the
right. But as far as I'm
telecom.
saying, as far as like industrial output, so
I
like
think it's like $14 billion.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just crazy because you see prisoners, and I don't know if you experience this as well, but getting paid, anywhere from 20 cents to a dollar. Um,
Yeah,
and meanwhile, they're making, 14 billion off of them.
yeah.
So that just kind of goes back to the exploitation of, minorities and Black people in prisons. Um,
Hmm.
How do you guys feel about how do y'all feel about that? Do you feel like that plays a big role in why they target Black communities and vulnerable people?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. One of the first things I sort of tell people when we talk about this conversation is the first truth you have to have when you're talking about the American criminal justice system is that the system is not broken. We love to talk about it like a broken system. The system is working exactly how it was designed to work. Okay.
Right.
So we are not talking about a broken system at all. It ain't broken. It ain't broke if it's working how they created it to work. Um, Everything that we see now is just a morphing or a reimagination of things that happened before. So slavery has not ended, it has evolved. Segregation has not ended, it has evolved. And so the profiteering off of Black bodies is as American as apple pie. And for anybody who thinks it ended at the Emancipation Proclamation, you are a fool.
Right.
They reimagined it with sharecropping, which was just an American type of feudalism meant to tie Black people to land. They never intended to let them own by putting them into a system of paying them the same 20 cents or 10 cents for a bushel of cotton, um, and creating debt on the land that was so far in excess for any amount that they were paying them. And then it just evolved again into inequitable wages. And now we have a system where it's like, oh, well, we can make even more money off of the overcriminalization, not just through fines, not just through administrative charges, not just through lawyers, but if we populate prisons with these bodies, we can then create contracts with other corporations and companies and literally auction off these people to do work that in any other environment every other human would make 8, 9, 10, 12, $11 an hour. We can pay them pennies on the dollar for that. So it's really important to just tell the truth that this is just the new age slavery. That's what it
Revolution.
is.
Right. Like you said, when feudalism wiped out slavery, it was revolutionary. Now capitalism wiped out feudalism. This revolution is just evolving, like you said.
Yeah. So it's not broken. So that's why we can't talk about this as like a broken system that we need to fix. We have got to talk about a reimagining of a system that's doing exactly what it's supposed to do and how we create a just system that is a system that lives up to the ideals that they never intended for us to benefit from. But since we know now that we can claim them as our birthright because we are citizens too, we need a system that actually does that, because what we have now is not that system. It is not that system at all.
Right.
Right. And I know that right now we're seeing, I think this is the most media coverage we've ever seen on police reform, and the most, protests we've seen about police reform in the past, few years. Um, and it's funny because, like you said, there's nothing to reform when it comes to that. It's more about, dismantling it. And people get
Revolution.
really offended when you say that, especially police officers. Um, when you think about, dismantling that system, and like, where's your starting point? What do you think could be put into place to do this effectively?
So I think that one of the reasons why defund the police is so important is because, again, you have to understand that the history of policing arises out of catching runaway slaves, right? So policing since its origins has been antagonistic to Black freedom, to Black agency, to um, to Black liberation, right? Um, and so when we talk about where do we start, we have to start with a law and order system that does not have in its DNA an antagonism to Black agency, Black freedom, and Black liberation, like the police structure we have in America. I mean, it is directly born out of private police forces that were taught to return runaway slaves.
Right.
So the place where we have to start is, how do we create a system of addressing valid criminal justice concerns we have in every community, not just Black community, because crime is a people problem, not a Black people problem. Crime is a people problem. So we definitely have to acknowledge the need for some type of system to address crime that will always be an issue, because there will always be crime and there will always be criminals. But the place we have to start from is acknowledging that we need to create a system that addresses our need to police against legitimate crime and legitimate criminals, that does not have in its DNA an inherent antagonism to Black people, to Black equality, and to Black liberation. And we have
Right.
got to tell the truth that the policing that we currently have in our country has that in its DNA.
Right, right. And I think that that's where, we get these offended, you know, remarks and things. People are like really offended by it. And whenever I see somebody who's offended by it, I'm like, why are you offended? Because if you're doing
True.
your job, and if you got into policing for the right reasons, then you should be able to see the problem as well. Um, you should be able to know there's a problem, and then you shouldn't be worried about losing your job, because at the end of the day, you're still there to help people. And if you're stable and mentally stable, then you can continue to do that in a different system.
Right.
Correct. Correct. And what we have to acknowledge, and I think what some officers are offended by, is that policing is not an interpersonal dynamic. It is a structural. It's structural. It's an institutional way of being. So when we talk about protecting and serving, the part that they left off is that police were created to protect and serve white supremacy. That is what it was created to protect and serve. It was created to protect and serve white people who wanted their property back. So it is in the protecting and serving bowl is the denial of black personhood. The problem is they decided to cut the end of the sentence off and then heroize the whole bowl as if we never knew that protect and serve didn't include us. And so I think a lot of the problem that individual officers have is that they want to treat policing like it is an interpersonal individual thing. This is not about the officers playing basketball in the street, doing the electric slide, doing, the Cupid shuffle. This is not about those individuals, but there is no amount of individual goodwill that can reorient a system that was designed to oppress and repress a particular group of people. And the
Right.
problem is that I think a lot of police officers are antagonistic to that fundamental truth. So this is not about an interpersonal dynamic between the good officers. This is about the fact that there are no amount of good officers you can put in a system that is designed to be discriminatory.
Right.
Period. Period.
Period.
Period. I'm with it.
For real.
I'm with it. And I like what you said about, a lot of times we hear that. I hear it all the time. But I'm a good cop. And it's like, okay, but I know a lot of good black people. Where's our,
Yeah.
so it's,
From you.
That's
right.
like saying if you put a NASCAR driver in a hoopty and they don't win a race, but I'm a good driver. Yeah, but you in a crap car. So it don't matter how good of a driver you are. It doesn't matter what skills you have. If the vehicle you're operating in cannot facilitate the showcase of your competence, you're gonna have to get a new vehicle eventually. So these good officers are like NASCAR drivers in hoopties, and they don't understand why they're not winning. You're not winning because the vehicle you're in is fundamentally flawed. Okay, so it
Right.
doesn't matter how many skills you have, the training you have, your intention. If you're not in a good vehicle, you ain't gonna win. Right? You're not gonna win.
I love that
You're
analogy.
not
Right.
gonna win.
Love
You
that.
know?
Use that one now. That's
I got
Yeah.
one question I want to ask you, Amber. I want to ask you, what do you feel like the relationship between capitalism and systemic racism is in this country?
Oh, child, they're twins. I mean, because here's the thing about capitalism. Black people were the capital, right? So so that's the place where you have to start. The pillage and the plunder of native land provided access to the space and the place, and the black people were the capital, literally. So because we have always been objectified, and here's the thing, because it's really not even objectification. America is built on the denial of black personhood. The transatlantic slave trade went to Africa and took people and brought us here and declared us property. So that's what they did because slaves were chattel. Um, just like a dog. Like if somebody, I got it, my kids have a dog. If somebody took my dog, I'd have to bring a personal property action in court. My dog is a living thing. The law says my dog is chattel. And black people were chattelized in the United States. And so capitalism is a problem because we are still chattelized. It is still based off of the denial of black personhood, and American capitalism is built on the notion that we are capital. So it exploits us at every turn. whether
Yeah.
it be through redlining, whether it be through wage exploitation, whether it be through the student loan enslavement. We are the capital,
Right.
and we were from the beginning, and we continue to be. So it's no different than the objectification of black bodies that is built into white supremacy. It's just done a little bit differently in capitalism, but ultimately, I mean, we was the capital.
Right.
So
Um, so going off of that, I think it's funny because a lot of times we hear, well, you know, y'all just doesn't that black guy isn't that black guy part owner of the Lakers? Like you see y'all own something. Y'all, they make you feel like you're asking for too much. And then we get, when we do ask for things, we get things like Black Lives Matter being written all over, sidewalks and streets. And how do you
Symbolism.
right symbolism? How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's just kind of like something that puts off our anger, or they feel will put off our anger?
I think sort of embedded in that type of thought is the subtext that there's a white ownership, or a like a black people aren't entitled to petition the government and address our grievances as citizens in the ways that we see fit. And I think the fact that we sort of engage in those conversations actually gives it life, because wasn't nobody asking white people about that when they were storming capitals about wearing masks. Was
Right.
nobody asking white people that when they were storming the capitals with their guns because they wanted to go to the gym and they wanted to go boating, right?
Right.
Did nobody ask them none of that, right?
Right.
It is implied in their resistance, that resistance is part of their birthright, right? And so I think when we have those kind of conversations about how we choose to resist, what our resistance look like, we give life to this subtext that resistance is not our birthright. Because white folks started this country by dumping England's tea in the damn Boston Harbor. They
Right.
literally took all these white people's tea and was like, if y'all ain't gonna listen to us, we gonna dump your shit in the water and burn your boat. And
Liberty and
I and I ain't never been in school and heard anybody talk about it as looting and plundering. But that's what it was.
Right.
It was. So I think sometimes we have to be very clear that resistance is our birthright too, and not even give life to certain conversations, because we don't have to explain to anybody how we choose to resist. This is our nation, and we have the right to call it to account for its crimes against humanity in the ways that we see fit. And I think that sometimes when we have conversations with people about writing Black Lives Matter and doing all of that, implied in that is that our resistance has to look a certain way to be valid. And it's like, well, why we not talking about what your resistance looks like? As idiotic as it is, nobody talks about that. And I think this idea that people have the right to police blackness, to police our bodies, to police our expressions of disdain with this country is peak white supremacy. And I personally, that is not a conversation I'm willing to have, because how I choose to resist, I'm a citizen. I pay taxes. I was born here. I live here. And I don't owe you an explanation about how I choose to resist. What you need to do is take my resistance and look at the ultimate end means I'm trying to achieve. And that's what we need to be having conversations about. Not whether you like how I'm resisting, but whether you think black people should be 3 times more likely to be killed by police than other people. That's what we need to be talking about. So I'm not talking to nobody about why we paint Black Lives Matter on the street. I will talk to you about what led to it, or what will make us stop. But you don't get to police my resistance. I'm an emancipated ass black citizen of this nation. And I can express my disdain with this nation's unfulfilled promises to me however I want, just like white people have since the beginning of this nation.
Right.
I love that.
That's a fact.
I love that.
They got the independence to liberty or death. A few stood up and said, "Man, freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody."
I
And you
mean,
get
that was
them.
committing whole acts of treason against the English government. And we pop fireworks off on the fourth about that. But you gonna talk to me about writing Black Lives Matter on the street? Goodbye, Karen. Not today. Not today. Not today.
Right.
No. Mm-mm.
She made a valid point. I say that all the time. We be at them. A lot of people will scream Black Lives Matter, but Black Liberation Matter. Like she say, liberation. We need our liberation. You can scream Black Lives Matter. I'm a black man. I've been going through. It always did matter. We know that. Black liberation is matter. That's what really matters. That's what we fight.
Yeah.
So if you really with us, Black liberation matter.
And we have to resist the urge to indulge the policing of our resistance. Because, yes, revolution is nasty, looting is nasty, plundering is nasty, rioting is nasty, but that is why people do it. That is why it is
Right.
subversive resistance that is meant to be provocative and to call the nation's attention to the moment and to the cause. So I think sometimes we very unintentionally indulge conversations about the policing of our resistance that impliedly gives life to the fact that we could do a better job of expressing our disdain. Well, is that really the best way to do it? I mean, do you have to paint Black Lives Matter in front of, the White House, or do you have to steal TVs from Target? Do you have
Right.
to do you have to kill me if I'm panhandling cigarettes, or
Right.
if I'm playing with a toy gun in a park? Like, so I think that you're absolutely right. Part of Black Lives Matter is embracing Black liberation and resisting the urge to give people the right to think that those are valid conversations to have, because they're not. Because
Right.
protest is literally as American as apple pie. You don't have a problem with protest. You have a problem with the fact that you don't think I have the right to protest.
Mm-hmm.
That is what you
Mm-hmm.
have a problem with. You don't have a problem with looting and plundering because you pop fireworks off about it every 4th of July. You have a problem with the fact that you don't think I have the right to loot and plunder. That's the problem. So
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly why I'm doing it, because you don't think I have a right to.
Right.
Right, because I am the capital, because I am 3/5 of a person still. So that's really the issue, the attitude that makes people think that that's a conversation we even need to be having, because we don't
Right.
never have that kind of conversation. White people bust up stuff after the damn Super Bowl and we don't even talk about it. Okay, spray painting eagles and cowboys, all we never talk about that.
Right.
But I can't bust up stuff because y'all killing us. No, ma'am, I ain't talking about it. First, I'm not.
Word.
Right, right. No, I'm with it. I hate when people, when I even see, comments on, looting and rioting. And a lot of times when you see people who are commenting on those things, they're not commenting on the issues at hand. They're only commenting on, I've seen people sharing posts solely about looting, rioting, but didn't say nothing about George Floyd.
Correct.
Right.
Didn't say nothing about, any
The
previous,
president.
the president. They still back the president, um, knowing that he endorses racism.
He said that's that tone and rhetoric I'm always talking to you about. He said that for them, that tone and rhetoric that come from the White House. He sets that people that platform for them to speak like that.
And let me tell you something. When Janet Jackson performed at the Super Bowl and her little piece of boob came out, the white people was outraged. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's a breast on TV. Prime time. My kids was watching that. And these same people think that we were supposed to watch a man suffocate to death for 8 minutes
Right.
on the same TV and not be outraged. I'm like, we saw a breast for 5 seconds and y'all was ready to throw the whole TV away, the whole NFL away. We needed a whole moral resurgence in America because little Connor and little Haley saw Janet Jackson's breast for 2 seconds. And y'all thought that we was going to watch a man suffocate to death in front of us for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and just be like, well, gosh, that was really sad.
Right.
I mean, it just defies logic. It defies logic that people thought that our nation could watch a man, and it doesn't matter whether he was a perfect man, he could have been a broken man, he could have been firing Uzis in the air. It doesn't matter. We watched a man who posed no danger in those moments to those officers. We watched him die. And what there are people in the world telling us that that was supposed to be normal. And we didn't just watch him like get shot. Because I think a lot of times we can fantasize that because we see it in movies. He died a slow, agonizing, moment by moment, minute death. 9 minutes is a long time.
Right.
A long time to watch somebody die in front of a nation. And for the people who thought that that was supposed to just go into the abyss of American history, into the annals of time, I mean, I think that's ridiculous because those same people was ready to throw the whole TV away because we saw a breast for 5 seconds.
Right. That just tell you don't value Black life,
Correct.
We're gonna make y'all like Tamika Mallory gave a speech about that after that happened. Was talking about, Target. She was saying, damn all that, we gonna same thing you just said. It is what it is. Y'all got y'all this freedom in this country from the same thing we trying to do. We need to be heard by any means, like Malcolm X said, by any means necessary.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Why you laughing?
Because it's just crazy. This is real life. Like this isn't just,
Shit crazy.
It really is. It's just that, like the things that, can outrage, even just masks. I just had an argument with somebody in the comments the other day about masks. This woman said that she was oppressed because they didn't wear a mask. I said, oppressed? You oppressed because they told you to wear a mask when you go in the grocery store. Like,
and you can hear it. You can hear it in their conversation. Because I was had my son at the pool earlier, and I was talking to this white man, and he was like asking me how I felt about that George Floyd situation. I'm like, yeah, I felt it's bringing a lot of different races together. It's like showing people finally started to get it because ain't no excuse for why this happened. Usually they be like, oh, he was running, or he was reaching, or some lie they make up. They feel like he was. Like, he still had the audacity to ask me, so what did the man do? What did he do? I'm like, it don't matter what he did. 8 minutes, 6 seconds. He said, so what did he do that happened? Like, that just shows you they don't get this shit. They still don't get it.
No, they get it. They just don't think it applies to us.
Right.
Because all Black crime is death penalty eligible in the white mind, right? So whatever George Floyd did or did not do, the role of the police is not to play judge, jury, and executioner. The role of the police is to come to the scene and determine whether there is probable cause for arrest and to make the arrest in a manner that is safe. So that's your only role. You don't get to decide that this man gets to die for his crime. He is entitled to be convicted in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury of his peers or by a judicial fact finder if he chooses to waive his right to a jury. So your only job is to ask, is there probable cause? And if the answer is yes, arrest him and take him to jail. So it doesn't matter what he did, because you don't get to sentence him to the death penalty for whatever he allegedly did or did not do. You just say, is there enough evidence to probably think that what the allegation is true? And if it is, arrest him and take him to jail. That is law enforcement's only function. You don't get to decide on the street that we should be sentenced to death for our crime. That is not how the criminal justice system works. And that is not your role. And that is the problem with how we talk about law enforcement. We talk about police like that is the role that they should have to play. There is only a very narrow class of crimes that are punishable by death in the United States. And passing a $20 counterfeit is not one of them.
Right.
Okay? It ain't one of them. It ain't. So
For real.
the proper procedure is to arrest him and take him to jail so that he can have his day in court. And when people, sort of make it about what the person did or did not do, what that tells me is that they believe that we aren't entitled to the justice that everybody else did. Because even if 30 people see me shoot somebody in the middle of my street right now, the police only have one job, and that's to come and arrest me because I'm still cloaked in the presumption of innocence until I'm convicted by beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. It does not matter how many people see me. Does
And they
not
did
matter.
that white boy. When that white boy killed all the people in that church, they went and gave us Burger King.
Correct, correct, correct. So the police's function is not a function of guilt or innocence. It's always the same job, whether the person is guilty or whether they are not guilty. Your job is simply to arrest them and remand them to the custody of the state until such time as they can go before a judge or a magistrate to determine if they will get bail. That is your only job. And that job doesn't change whether the person did what they're accused of or not. It doesn't.
Right.
It's the same job, always. You don't get to execute people, even if they're guilty.
Right.
Not your job. Not your job.
That's the bottom line.
And Ace, did you have any other questions for Amber? I know you said you had a few things that you were just
I
before.
think she answered the other question I wanted to ask. Well, what do you believe? I think she answered it though. I was going to just ask, what does she believe it would take to eradicate this cancer and racism in this country? But she's been breaking it down.
Right? Yeah,
She answered it.
basically just starting from, the bottom.
And I think one other thing to add to that is that, particularly with our white brothers and sisters, racism can't be eradicated if you see it as an interpersonal issue. So you can't be invested in anti-racism because you got a white husband or a black husband or black friends or a black cousin. America has to become clear that racism is morally repugnant. Whether you know somebody black, whether you got a black uncle, a black baby daddy, black kids, that can't be the issue. It cannot be interpersonal. Until Americans of all races, shades, nationality, creeds, faiths, genders, sexes become sold out to the fact that hierarchies of men and women are morally repugnant, racism will continue to exist. Because if your investment in anti-racism, or really the liberation of any marginalized person, is based on your proximity to that people group or to that cause, it will always be temporary and it will always be fleeting. We need a moral conviction as a nation that racism is no different than murder. It's no different than child molestation. It's no different than anything else. I don't know. I don't know anybody who has ever been accused of murder, or I don't know in my personal space anybody who has any close friends or family members who have been murdered. That I'm not morally convinced in my heart that the unjustified taking of somebody's life without provocation is wrong. And we have to
Right.
talk about racism in the same way. There just has to be a moral conviction. And until we start talking to white people and other non-black people about the fact that you just got to be morally sold out that this is wrong, so that you can become invested in deconstructing it. Not because you know me, not because you know no other black people, not because it's the cause du jour of the moment, but because you are firmly morally convicted in yourself that it is repugnant to discriminate against somebody because of what color their skin is, this problem is always going to exist.
Right. And I think it's going to be hard. It's real hard, to convince that to white people. Because I was talking to Jamie and our from our group, and she was saying basically how it's privilege. Like, but racism is power, equals power, structures opportunity, and assigns value to them. So they benefiting off of racism. So that's going to be the challenge of getting people to realize that even though you benefit off of this racism, you gotta, like you say, and fight and understand more that is morally wrong and denounce that shit.
Yeah, and we treat anti-racism like marketing. I'm not trying to market to you. I'm not trying to sell you no tennis shoes or no handbag. I'm not interested in glitzing and glamming to you. We have to approach anti-racism like gospel, like ministry. This is not. I am not interested in getting you to be impressed or trying to stir your senses or catch your attention. And I think until we decide to stop treating the work of anti-racism like a marketing campaign and talk about it like what it is, this is about a moral mission. It is a moral mission. It is a ministry. It is really fundamentally no different than gospel or faith or religion. It is something that you have to have a conviction about in your soul, not something I can glitz and glam you or impress you into believing. Because if that's the case, this moment will be just like Trayvon. It will be just like Tamir Rice. It'll be just like all the others. We'll have 5 or 10 good minutes and it'll be back to business as usual, because that's what all effective marketing campaigns are designed to do, to capture the moment. But we can't market it to people. It has to be deeper than that. And we have got to stop cheapening anti-racism by trying to, put some Christmas lights on it to make white people want to buy a ticket to the show. You know,
Right.
it can't be that. It can't be that. Because if my life matters, I'm not going to cheapen my life by trying to convince you with oohs and ahs to believe it matters. That has to be your moral conviction because of our shared humanity. So it's got to be deeper than that. Because when we stop talking about George Floyd, because unfortunately the day will come when we stop, you still got to believe my life matters. When your racist uncle is popping jokes off at the table when I'm not there, when no black people are there, when nobody's there to hold you accountable in the deep, dark annals, when nobody will ever know but you and the good Lord, you got to believe it. Not
Right.
because you'll be perfect and do it perfect, but because if you are morally convicted, you will always repent and get back on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yes. That's good.
So,
Moral revolution. I think Dr.
absolutely.
King said that. I think Dr. King said that before.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't extricate justice for morality. And when you try to do that, you don't get justice and you don't get morality. You don't. You
Right.
don't get either one.
Neither.
Hmm.
Right. Well, I learned a lot from you today.
Thank y'all for having me. This was so much fun. I'm so glad we got to reschedule it. I love talking to people who are coming to this work from different perspectives and different places. And so I'm so glad our paths crossed. And so thank y'all so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you
coming
too.
on. I definitely learned a lot. You definitely, you're an inspiration to me for sure. I know to many other people as well. And yeah, I look forward to just, being able to have you as a point of contact and being able to, talk to you about things going on. So I'm really
Absolutely.
happy you came on here.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much. Thank you.
All
All right.
right.
All right. Y'all have a great afternoon.
You too.
You
Bye.
too.
Bye.
Bye.